Welcome to Tech Intersect. I'm your host, Tanya Evans, and my life and work exist at the heart of law, business, and technology. Yeah, I've earned a few fancy titles and degrees over the years, but the bottom line is I'm a writer, speaker, teacher, and lifelong learner, and I'm really excited that you've joined me on this journey. So what is Tech Intersect? Well, it's authentic, empowering conversations with really interesting guests who demystify complex topics to prepare you for the future. Because your future is now. And it exists where law, business, and tech intersect. Get ready to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 31 of the Tech Intersect podcast. I'm your hostess with the mostest, Tanya Evans, and I'm excited to connect with you today because in this episode of Tech Intersect, I speak with Professor Kelly Knight. Professor Knight is an assistant professor with the George Mason University Forensic Science Program and also a STEM accelerator. That's science, technology, engineering, and math. As a STEM accelerator, she guides and mentors undergraduate students in the forensic science program and also coordinates the K-12 STEM outreach that includes the females of color and those underrepresented in STEM summer programs for middle and high school girls. She has such an interesting background and a really impressive expertise in the challenging, dynamic field of forensic science. And we talk about first of all, what forensic science is, but also what it isn't. And she dispels myths about crime science investigations, especially given the popularity of the CSI shows. You might have seen 1 or 10,000. She talks about the pain points, but also the career opportunities for Black women in STEM and in academia, and also the future of CSI and how technology is improving capabilities so that students of today, especially Black and brown women and girls, can prepare for the careers of the future. No more hidden figures in 2020 and beyond. A final note before we get into the episode, I'm hosting a free masterclass on how you can quickly transform your bank account and your business in order to win in the new digital cash economy and do so without getting scammed or getting lost in the weeds. So if you believe cryptocurrency is too complicated, too confusing, and way too risky, my upcoming masterclass is for you. Just 3 years ago, I believed the exact same thing, but I've worked really hard to make it make sense so you don't have to. I've done the heavy lifting through the jargon, all the fringy buzzwords in order to demystify and clarify how to participate safely and also in a supportive, inclusive environment. And now I want to share what I've learned with you. So join me on Saturday, July 25th at noon Eastern Time, or if you can't attend live, still register so that you receive the link to the replay after I finish the live session. I'm going to teach you how to set up a wallet. I'm going to teach you the differences and similarities between cryptocurrencies and currency issued by governments and stocks, what it all means. I'm going to make it make sense in 1 hour. Please join me. And if you've never had any experience in finance or tech, or you've had some experience and want to take a deeper dive, hop on with me for this masterclass and let's connect and let's take it to the next level so that we are not left behind in this fourth industrial revolution. Time to win, time to move forward. Okay, time to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. Today, I have the great pleasure to chat with Professor Kelly Knight. She's an assistant professor with the George Mason University Forensic Science Program. She's also the director of its STEM Accelerator. The Accelerator serves as a mentoring opportunity for undergraduate students in the Forensic Science Program and also to provide K-12 STEM outreach for underestimated middle and high school girls. I love that. We're going to definitely talk about that in the episode. And so she'll tell us more about all that she's working on. We connected for a number of reasons. I'm a fan. I'm an IG fan. You all know that I'm a complete nut when it comes to social media, but some of my most authentic and wonderful connections have been through that medium. And I was connected in particular because I'm fascinated with Professor Knight's work in crime scene investigation, also known as CSI. I'm sure you all have heard of that. You think you know everything about CSI, but she's going to tell us the real deal when we get into this. I know that I want to know everything I need to understand all of the TV shows that wrap up investigations in 60-minute blocks, because evidently that is possible. But first, I am thrilled to finally connect with you, Professor Knight. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's begin with an overview of your origin story and how you found your way to science generally and also crime science investigation in particular.
Sure, sure. So I always credit my father with introducing me to my obsession with STEM and all things science. So my dad was an air traffic controller. He's retired now from the Federal Aviation Administration, but he always had a love for anything related to aerospace and airplanes and rockets and all of those things. And so he very early on introduced me to aviation. So we would build rockets together,
Mm,
toy airplanes together. And I mean, I just really love how he introduced me to things that, being a girl, a lot of parents
hmm
would shy away from. He wasn't afraid to kind of push past those typical stereotypes. I still was a very girly girl. I still
hmm
loved, dolls, and I still love dressing up, but he didn't let that deter him from still introducing me to things that are really normally considered quote unquote boy type things. So,
Right, right.
uh, yeah, so he built me a secret laboratory in my basement. I posted a picture of that on my,
Aw.
and everybody got a kick out of that. But that's when I really knew, I want to be a scientist. I love science. And I really bounced around between, what type of scientist I wanted to be. At first, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I did some work as a vet tech while I was in high school. And
hmm
I was involved in my first euthanization, having to put a dog
mm.
to sleep, and I cried harder than the owner.
Oh.
I said, okay, I don't think this one is for me.
Let's find another one. I
Yeah,
don't know how this one's going to go.
yeah, I'm like, all right, I don't think this. I mean, I love animals, but I
Mhm.
love them too much that, uh, having to be there through the good and the bad wasn't going to be
Mm.
something I wanted to do. But the thing that really drew me to forensics was in high school, in 11th grade, I had a teacher by the name of Miss Baldwin, and she taught my anatomy and physiology class. And she had in one of our labs, it was a blood typing lab. And
Mhm.
that just kind of dates even how long ago this was because nobody's doing blood typing anymore, but it was still really cool because basically what the lab involved was we were given a list of individuals like a suspect, a victim, and a crime scene sample. So it was set in like a crime scene type arena. And this was before the crime scene shows were popular. So
Right.
we were really brand new to this whole idea of using science to solve crime. And that lab was just so interesting to me because, I had spent all of this time learning biology and chemistry and all these other sciences. And, a lot of times students don't understand the application. They don't get why they care. Like, they don't get why
Mm.
teaching them, all of these formulas and all of these things about these different molecules and, so on and so forth. And this was the first time I really made that connection between science and the real world. And know
Mm.
that, everything that I had learned up until this point is actually not only used for a purpose and used in real life, but it was used to help people. Like people were being brought to justice and people were able to find, the killers or, their assailants or, whoever had committed these crimes against them. And that to me was just so intriguing. So when I got to
Mm.
college, I still kind of was bouncing around with what I wanted to study. I started out wanting to be a doctor because I just think that was what was kind of ingrained in my head. When you want to be a scientist, people always think of the typical stuff, being a doctor or a
Right.
biologist or something like that. But then, I realized pretty much in my first semester that that wasn't really where my passion lied. So I ended up minoring in forensic chemistry because I had remembered that lab from high school. And so after minoring in forensic chemistry, I didn't go the chemistry route, and that was because I did an internship in a DNA lab my senior year. And
Mm.
that's really fell in love with forensic DNA. So that's ultimately the route that I went.
So tell me about forensics and what a forensic scientist does specifically. It's a very specific discipline and it's really, really fascinating. So let's unpack it a bit to understand what the day in the life of a forensic scientist might be.
Right, right. So the most simple definition of a forensic scientist is an individual who applies a science to the law. Now, that can definitely
Hmm.
be expanded because forensics is way more than just science. Forensics is such an amazing example of STEM in and of itself because there's literally a little bit of STEM involved in all different types of forensic science. You can have forensic engineers, you can have forensic scientists who use math for like biological modeling or things like that. You have forensic scientists who work more in the tech arena, like cybersecurity or
Right.
or that kind of thing. So it really goes beyond just the application of science. At this point, I would expand it to say really the application of any area of STEM, which is
Mm.
used to not only apply it to matters of the law, but even you can go a little further and just say if you're trying to take something that's unknown or what we would call like a questioned sample or questioned identity and trying to figure that out by comparing it to something that's known, that can
Mm.
be considered a forensic science.
That is really helpful to me because I've seen the term used. I not only am I an intellectual property attorney and professor, but also on the innovation and technology side. And I've developed an expertise, and I use that in quotations because no one's truly an expert in blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. But I've spent several years in that space, and I know that there is an area of forensics that has developed in the space in
Hmm.
order to track cryptocurrency addresses
Hmm.
to root out, nefarious activity that might be recorded on a blockchain. And they use the term forensics to uncover that, really following the quote unquote money or following the addresses in order to uncover. And what you said really made a light bulb go off for me to say comparing the unknown to the known in order to put the pieces together to tell the story, if I'm saying that correctly.
That's exactly what we do. Putting the pieces together to solve a puzzle, to figure out how these things are connected. At the end of the day, that's really what any individual who's involved in forensics to some aspect, that's ultimately what they're doing.
Really, really interesting. So I can imagine, given all of the TV shows, that there are so many myths that you must come up against, not only for your students, but outside of that with family, friends, and in your networks. What are some of the common myths that you come up against and things that you have to dispel that relate to forensic science?
Right. So usually when I tell people I'm a forensic scientist, the first thing I hear is like CSI or
Right.
the other show. They say like NCIS or all of these
USS,
other.
SUV, I don't know, all the acronyms,
I
right?
know so many of them, and I just kind of laugh because I'm so used to hearing it now. And I mean, there's a couple of very common misconceptions that I see just from watching the shows. I like to watch them just, I call it background research because as forensic scientists, when we go to testify in court, the juries, this is what they know of forensic science. And so by watching the shows, it kind of gives me a
Mm.
framework for knowing what I need to break down, what type of what type of misconceptions I need to break down because I have to understand that they're making this decision often based off of what they know from television shows and comparing that to my testimony. So,
Right.
for example, as a DNA analyst, one common misconception is that you always get a DNA profile every single time, regardless of the sample, regardless of how much was there. You're always going to get a DNA profile and it's going to be great. And the individual's face is going to, pop out as soon as you put their sample in the database, like 30 seconds later. So that's a big one that I have to kind of dispel when I testify. And another one is that forensic scientists are experts in everything. So
Mm.
for example, on the show CSI, The crime scene investigators will go to the scene, they'll collect the evidence, they'll take it back to the laboratory, and they'll do all of the different analyses on it. They'll do the DNA testing, they'll do the fingerprints, they'll do all these different types of tests, and they will, interrogate the suspect in the process of it. So they're
Right.
they're doing all of the jobs. Like they're doing the guy plus the lab analyst plus the police officer, and that's like the furthest thing from the truth. Like in a crime laboratory, there are different expertises, and each expertise has its own laboratory, and you're hired to work in that expertise and that expertise only. You don't cross train generally or anything like that. So
Mm,
I was hired. My title was forensic scientist, but I was hired to work in the forensic biology unit. And so all of my testing was within the forensic biology unit. I never went to a crime scene. I worked 9 to 5. I didn't work, overnight or anything like that. And I didn't do any type of chemistry testing or fingerprint testing or anything like that. I just worked within DNA. And then, of course, there's the over glamorizing of the
right.
crime shows as well, which, especially for students coming in to the major, we have to really break that down fast because they see these shows and they think it's glamorous. They see the white suits and the Hummers and the fancy glasses and
Mhm.
quote unquote fun stuff, but they don't see the fact that we actually wear like marshmallow suits, and we're generally walking around with like bodily fluids all over us
God.
and sticky and gross, and you deal with stuff that can be emotional for you at times, and you spend a lot of time at your desk taking phone calls and writing notes and doing report writing and doing calculations and doing case reviews, and this is the
Mhm.
side of the crime scene shows you never see. You only see like the fun stuff. You don't see
Right.
all the crap that goes on behind the scenes.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of Tech Intersect. Our conversation will continue in a moment, but first, a word on an exciting opportunity.
There's a more cost-effective and time-efficient way to reach your leading-edge learning and earning goals to put you ahead of the stiff competition in this fast-paced, tech-driven economy. You need skills, credentials, and a fast track to a competitive advantage. You need it now more than ever, and I can help. Invest in the future you've always wanted, and in as little as 3 weeks, you'll be on your way to greater autonomy, control, and opportunity in your life. The Advantage Evans method puts you ahead of the curve with condensed, comprehensive online courses, curated content to leverage your current skills and expertise in order to succeed in the new economy, live coaching with me, networking opportunities, and a digital badge on completion. Upcoming courses include From Cash to Crypto, Buying Your First Bitcoin, and Register Right, Protecting Your IP, Brand, and Business. Ready for your advantage? Well, get on the fast track to learn and earn at AdvantageEvans.com.
And now, back to the conversation.
Right. It's the fun stuff and not the crap behind the scenes. And then what you've mentioned, your interaction with bodily fluids and all of these things. And it leads, we are recording this in the midst of the 2020 pandemic, the Rona, all that's going on in the world. I'm wondering, how has COVID-19 changed the path for forensic scientists in terms of engaging or interacting with people in putting together these pieces? The pieces are actually, have the potential to be impacted by the pandemic. So how has the profession changed in light of what's going on this year?
Right. So that's definitely something that individuals who are interested in forensic science need to consider, the fact that we are considered essential employees. We're essential personnel. And so, there's no, you can just work from home kind of thing when
Mm,
you become a forensic scientist. You are basically an extension. I don't want to say an extension of law enforcement, but you're a part of the justice system. And
right.
crime doesn't stop because of a pandemic. And so there are still cases that need to be worked. And so the forensic scientists still have to go in, but they're implementing guidelines in order to still be safe. So, like, they're doing alternate scheduling. They've expanded the day so everybody doesn't have to be in at the same time. They're still
Mm,
social distancing. But then, of course, you still have to, like the crime scene investigators. I mean, if there's someone that is, that has been murdered or something like that, and they may have had the virus, they're still going to have to work that crime scene. I mean, they're still going to have to be there. I mean, at that point, I don't think the virus should affect them if they're working the homicide. I would hope not. I don't know
right.
a lot
Right.
about viral biology. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that it may not be as much of a concern, but the reality is it's still in the back of your head that if
Absolutely.
someone is infected with it, whether it be the person who was actually assaulted or murdered, or whether it's the other investigator that you're working with or the police officers that show up at this crime scene, the reality
Mm-hmm.
is any of those people can be infected. But it's just like, if you're a nurse and you're going to a hospital and the other people who work with you, you hope they're not infected because they're still going through the appropriate precautions in order to go to work. They're doing the temperature checks and all those things. But
Right.
that coronavirus does not discriminate and it does not make itself obvious. So, you have the asymptomatic
Right.
people who are walking around. So at the end of the day, they're putting their lives on the line just like any other frontline worker.
Absolutely. There were some reports. I don't have it in front of me now, but I will, if I find it, I will drop it in the show notes about statistics or reports, I should say, from funeral directors
Hmm.
now who have, tested positive at unusual rates. Now, that could be because of interaction with the decedent. That could be because you're holding funerals and all of these people are coming in,
Right,
right? So the fact of something doesn't lead to the reason for something, as you know, as a
right,
scientist,
right.
far more than we do. The fact, we are left to our conclusions and kind of putting those pieces together, but there's that, leads to just so much that we don't know about the virus, right? So my goodness, we'll stick a pin in that. That's a
Yeah,
whole other episode.
exactly.
But you mentioned something earlier that I also wanted to talk about because it really goes to the intersection of law and technology and science, and that's, the underpinning of this entire podcast, and that's about testifying in a
Hmm.
court of law to, as an expert witness. Talk to us about what that experience is for you.
Yeah, so I would say that getting ready for testimony as a student was when I started at the crime lab, that was probably the one area of being a forensic scientist I was the least prepared for. Because,
Mm,
I mean, no one can really prepare you for testimony until you like have done it. You know what I'm
right.
saying? So they definitely at the lab, you are required to go through a certain amount of training and things of that sort in order and go through a mock trial in order to be considered officially qualified as a qualified expert.
Hmm.
Um, but even then, it's just a matter of getting that experience and actually being in the courtroom and doing it for yourself where you learn the biggest lessons. I will say my mock trial, my I laugh about this all the time because my supervisors and my trainer did an excellent job at my mock trial because it was by far probably the worst experience I've ever had.
Oh gosh.
So bad that I cried after it, and
Oh,
told me they said that was done purposefully because we want it to be your worst experience. Like, we want you to be able to prepare for the worst when you go on the stand. And in my particular situation, what they really taught me through my mock trial experience, and it has really followed me throughout the times that I have had to testify, was the young lady who was selected to play the role of my prosecutor or my state's attorney, who normally, because I worked for the Maryland State Police,
Mhm.
normally those were the individuals who were submitting the evidence. And so they're normally the ones who were calling us to testify. And so what happened during this particular situation was the defense attorney was so good at ripping my testimony apart, she neglected to offer redirect. And so when we got
Mm.
in, the mock jury, basically, they were left with, whatever statements were said during the cross examination.
Right.
And even though I was almost upset with her at that moment, because I
Right.
was, I didn't redirect her to let me defend myself.
Right.
But there were two really big lessons I learned from that experience. And that's number one, you have to remember that the attorneys are just doing their jobs. It's not a matter of, this person against this person or them against you. They're doing their jobs. And so if an attorney during questioning does certain things that takes away from the main purpose of your testimony, you
Mhm.
continue to repeat yourself to make sure that the jury understands the point of your testimony, because there may not ever be a chance to come back. So
That's great. Great
yes,
advice.
absolutely. So that was those were the two main things, with that the attorneys are not necessarily against you, they're doing your jobs. And number two, always testify like you may not ever get a chance to re-explain yourself, because we are there for the jury. We are there to
Mm.
explain to them in the most ethical and unbiased fashion what we did and why we did it, and we want them to have
Mm.
clarity about that when we get to the end. And so even though I laugh at that mock trial experience now, it's been very good for me, because when I go to court to testify, if I find myself in a situation where I feel like the line of questioning is taken away from the point of the testimony, I will
Mhm.
say, instead of saying like a simple yes or no, I'll definitely make sure that I have a point where I can qualify my answer. I'll say yes, but, no, but, and make sure that I'm constantly reiterating my conclusion. Because, like, one example I give to my students, I say, think about the fact that when I'm lecturing to you in class and I'm saying all of these scientific things, you all are studying forensic science and you're sometimes lost and confused. So imagine how it feels to be a juror who is being thrown all of this information all at once. And a lot of
Mhm.
times when you have the forensic scientists come on, you have a lot of scientific information being thrown at you, and they're forced to make sense of it. And their decision may be literally life or death, or, jail time or no jail time for someone. And
Right.
so it's very important that you do the best job possible in explaining the purpose of your role in the case, so that they can make the appropriate decision.
That is really, really important, and thank you for sharing that. That is obviously the lawyer in me is supremely fascinated by that side when I think about experts involved, and so I think the profession is very fortunate to have you as an expert to come in an unbiased way and just speak to the facts, but also to understand the process, because it's really not,
Mhm,
at the end of the day, not just about the veracity of what is being conveyed, but also
mhm,
the fact that it's, it's a maze, that it's a process, that it's a procedure,
mhm,
that,
absolutely.
testimony is a part of it, but it's not all of it. And understanding your role in that really is the best type of zealous participation to make sure that the facts are laid out sufficiently in a way that best supports a decision by the jury. So kudos to you for that. Final question. I want to respect your time because I could do this all day. And I just looked up, was like, oh my goodness, I have so much more to say. But this has been really rich. And I want to get you back to your rest time. But you have done so much extraordinary work to support the, for lack of a better term, STEM pipeline. I don't always use the term pipeline because when I think of all of the brilliant and amazing people who I know that I'm exceptional, but I'm not the exception. There are a lot of people like me. People out there in the world, you might not know it, but you see it on a regular basis as you engage at the undergraduate and also through your other programs at the K through 12 level to make sure that science and technology and engineering and math is accessible to Black and brown women and girls so that they have a fully realized opportunity in various STEM disciplines. So talk about your work there, and an additional point, what they have to look forward to. What are the jobs of the future that they may be studying to be a part of in the STEM realm?
If you're an engineer or a scientist, you love Formula One, you love cycling, you love learning about how new technologies are changing the world around us, then I thought you may want to listen into my new podcast, the Neil Ashton Podcast. We talk to leading engineers and scientists from around the world, hear about their life stories, hear about new technologies, and hopefully educate you and give you a better sense of how key things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, supercomputing are changing the world around us. If that sounds like it's something you might like, you should come and have a listen.
Right. So I am the director of a program called Females of Color and Those Underrepresented in STEM. And that started out as just one program. It was a middle school camp for girls of color rising 6th grade through 8th grade. And each day of the camp, we do different parts of STEM. So, for example, on Monday, we'll do science workshops, and Tuesday, we'll do tech, and Wednesday, engineering, Thursday, math. And Friday, we give them a chance to kind of bring it all together. And then we have a session where they can gain confidence in their public speaking, and we do a poster session. And the goal of that is to, number one, surround them with other people who look like them, that support their learning, who are encouraging, who kind of dispel the false narrative that girls aren't interested in STEM, and to really approach it from a culturally responsive perspective so that they have a chance at wanting to like STEM too. Because a lot of times these students, by the time they're in middle school, they've kind of been counted out already, and no one has really gone the extra mile to push them and say, hey, you're smart and you're beautiful and you can do STEM, and some things you should do in order to pursue it and see if you're interested. And so we try to provide that opportunity for them that's a little different from the way they do things in school, because sometimes when you get to the middle and high school level, STEM is not fun anymore. When you're in elementary school, they do all the school experiments, and then they start to lose that sometimes when they get to middle and high school. So we try to show them the magic of STEM, really, in an environment where not only do all the other participants look like them, but also our mentors and our counselors. We draw a lot from our Women of Color in STEM student organization on campus, which I'm the advisor for. And we draw from them because we really want our participants to really see themselves in college studying STEM. Because again, that's something that's lacking when you look at books and just books in general that students are exposed to that are related to STEM. It's not a lot of pictures and lessons around people of color in STEM. I mean, can you think of anybody in STEM that was a woman of color that you learned about at school? Because I cannot.
No, don't even get me to stop to lying.
I can't even think of one.
Not one.
I only remember learning in terms of women of color, like Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman. It's always the people who had to fight for their rights, but it's never. Yeah, it's like it's never the people who, by the way, there are also all these brilliant, innovators and, people like Katherine Johnson. So that's just, discouraging. So we try to help them through that. And now that grew into a high school program where it's residential. So the students can really get immersed in the college experience. And we focus a lot on college readiness and, trying to provide, call it STEM social capital. So trying to provide them with a lot of the networks and the skills that people who are quite frankly, white or,
Right, right,
other people who are not people of color. That's kind of a gift to them. And we're trying to kind of bridge that gap for some of our students of color who don't have access to these networks. And I mean, even for myself, I wasn't a first generation student, but I was a first generation STEM student.
right.
And me being a STEM student, that was a very different experience for my parents. So there were some things that I should have done in undergrad that I didn't know to do because my parents didn't know to tell me to do
Right.
it. And I didn't have advisors or mentors to tell me to do it. Nobody was jumping at the opportunity to tell me to do that. So, we try to put those bugs in their ear, like, pursue undergraduate research or, these other things that nobody may not necessarily be in your circle to kind of push you
Right.
to do kind of thing. So I'm doing that at the K through 12 level. And then, of course, I try to mentor as many young women as possible at the undergraduate level, just because I didn't receive that gift until grad school. I had a woman mentor me beginning in grad school, and that was life changing for me. And I just feel like because that was granted to me, I'm just trying to pay it
Hmm.
forward. And so I try to extend that to as many women as possible because that's really critical. Having a mentor and an advisor that can help walk you through the things that you should do is really, really critical because there's so much, there's just so much to learn. So,
All the
so much to
things.
learn. And
All the things.
oh, exactly. And I mean, in terms of things that students should be looking to do in the future, I mean, I tell students when it comes to STEM, you don't want to think about what's needed now. You want to try to get a gauge for what's needed in 5 years or 10 years because that's where the jobs are going to be. And that's when they're going to be coming out of college and when all of these fields are going to start exploding. So, of course, we know that there's a lot going on in the tech arena right now. So, definitely trying to get connected with some tech mentors and picking their brain and saying, what's the next thing? What do I need to get involved in? I know in the fall, we're probably going to have, I would love to see the statistics on this, but I'd love to see how many more new public health and epidemiology majors we're going to have coming out of this pandemic because I think now more than ever before, people are realizing how important those fields are. And I don't think they realize, I don't think a lot of students, they hear about like an area like public health, but they don't really know what it
Hmm.
means or what do they,
No.
like they don't have the exposure to know, like, why would I want to do that? So
Right.
I, I think there's going to be definitely a boom there. But I mean, get connected. I would recommend for students start doing some searches on LinkedIn, get connected with some tech folk, especially see if you can interview them, shadow them, and just pick their brain. See if they're willing to talk to you about, what are some things they think are coming down the pipeline. I know for us in forensics, again, there's going to be a lot of tech stuff that's coming out. Cybersecurity, of course, is huge. In the DNA perspective, we're looking
Hmm.
at what we call genetic genealogy. So now being able to use family trees and ancestry lines to start solving some of these cases. So there's so many things. It just takes a matter of putting that effort in to start searching because there's so many things that's going to be coming out that you can do more than just the typical STEM careers. Go beyond the
Right.
biologists and the chemists and those things. There's going to be very niche areas that are going to be
Hmm.
needing people to fill.
That's fantastic advice. I'm going to do a little research and maybe I'll ping you after this and see if I can drop some resources in the show notes as well. There'll be so many opportunities. I have a speaking engagement coming up for Black women in science and engineering to talk
Hmm.
about, what opportunities are presented in the future and how to start to prepare for that. I know I created my current lane. 5 years from now, I was not talking about blockchain. I didn't
Hmm.
really know what it was. Maybe 4 years ago, I had heard about cryptocurrency, heard about
Hmm.
Bitcoin, sounded like drug money. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know where it was, but I knew that I wanted to figure it out because it was important that my students be prepared to engage with technologists and scientists and computer developers in order to solve the biggest problems in the future. And if you're
Right.
going to do that, then you need to start today to prepare yourself. And in order to prepare them, I had to prepare myself. And in that way, I created an interesting lane for myself to kind of make myself indispensable, because most people, no matter where I work, don't really know what I'm talking about. So that's awesome.
Exactly. Most of the
So
jobs
do
you
that, students.
would, you would.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me and talking through this. It's the beginning of what I hope will be much to come. I've appreciated engaging with you on the interwebs and now certainly on the podcast. Can you tell people how they can connect with you, learn more about your work and things that are coming up for you?
Sure. So on Instagram, I am at Kelly the Scientist, and that's Kelly with just a Y. And on Twitter, I'm still working on my Twitter skills, but
You got to raise your Twitter
I
game up a
really
little
do,
bit.
because that is not really my arena. I'm mostly on Instagram, but on Twitter, I'm starting to step it up a little bit. I'm at Scientist KK.
Excellent. Love it. I love a good trademark. Hit me up if you want me to do your trademark work. I'm happy to do that.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Professor Knight, I appreciate you. I love the work that you're doing, how you move in the space, how you are empowering Black and brown women and girls in STEM. And you have a lifelong fan. So thank you very much. Well, it was really a pleasure to connect with Professor Knight and to learn about her work, especially her tireless commitment to increasing opportunities for Black and brown women and girls in science, technology, engineering, and math. And it was really interesting to hear about what an expert in the field offers in a courtroom and testifying as an expert. So there's so many facets to forensic science, both in the actual practice of the science, also teaching in academia, and then serving as an expert in the legal field. That brings technology, business, and innovation, and all of the things that we talk about here with law, technology, and business at Tech Intersect. So this was a fantastic conversation with Professor Knight. All right. Speaking of winning in STEM and beyond, again, please join me Saturday, July 25th at noon Eastern Time for my free masterclass about how to learn and earn in this new digital cash economy. We're talking about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, what blockchain is. If you don't know the answer to that question, hop on with me and let's get at it. So if you are new to the show or haven't heard me talk about this area before, my passion truly is empowering underestimated lifelong learners, traditionally locked out of the tech and finance world, to really take control of our finances and our financial futures, to participate fully and confidently in the new digital cash economy, to make sure that you're safe, that you're doing it legally, and also that you're in a welcoming space and community so you can stay ahead of the curve, create autonomy, opportunity, generational wealth in this fast-paced, tech-driven world. Join me on this journey. I look forward to connecting with you. All right. Whew, that's a lot in this episode. I can't wait to hear it myself. That's all for now, but until next time, continue to shine.
Stay in touch with host Tanya Evans via your favorite social media. On Twitter at Tech Intersect and on Instagram via the handle Tech Intersect. This podcast has been produced by Stephanie Renee for Soul Sanctuary Incorporated.